Welcome to Season 2 of Digging Deeper Ag Chats with Al, the podcast that brings you timely and practical stories straight from the paddock. From sowing to shearing, fire to flood, and everything in between. We're here when it matters most. Each episode taps into real experiences, expert voices, and grounded advice that helps you stay ahead on farm. I'm Alistair from the Gippsland Agriculture Group, a grassroots farmer-led network in Gippsland, focusing on soil, grain and fodder, pasture and livestock. We're here to support producers in building resilient and profitable enterprises across our region. So let's dig in. Welcome everyone to Digging Deeper. I have a guest on, Anthony Snow, today. How you going, Anthony?
Good, Al. How are you, mate?
Very good. Now, I've been looking forward to this one. It's been a long time in the making. You've been a little bit of a reluctant guest, but very pleased that you're here finally.
Yeah, mate, it is an honour to be here, but I have been a bit reluctant. There's lots that's sort of gone on for us since we've been here in East Gippsland, but our story's, I guess, one that got us here just by chance. There was a great job that came up, and we're here now and absolutely love it. Yeah,
we're going to go right back before the move to East Gippsland, but I will say, whenever we've spent time in the car, I've always loved chatting to you. You have lots of interesting stories, and the way you think about business and farming is quite unique, I reckon, in certain aspects, and so we're going to try and hopefully extract some of that information out of you. But let's go right back. You didn't actually grow up in a farming background per se with livestock, did you?
No, I grew up, my old man was in a grounds maintenance, landscape, kind of turf industry where, he sort of developed a turf renovations style of business early days, which was pretty unique, I guess, for the turf industry. And I used to spend all my Christmas holidays, all my school holidays with Dad, helping him out. I loved working with him, and got a real appreciation for machinery and just general work. I suppose I enjoyed getting out and having a bit of a go. But it was one of those things, I guess, that getting along with Dad as well as I have over the years, we worked, but that was our thing. And I guess it's kind of set us up quite well for work ethic later in life.
Yep. So where was this, Snowy?
So I grew up in Bacchus Marsh, and then I went to school in Geelong later, and we sort of finished school in Geelong, and we had most of our business was statewide really. Went out on my own with the turf renovations and sports field construction, and that took us all over the place. We were sort of up into the ACT and New South Wales, all over Victoria. So being young, it was okay, but when you want to settle down, it was something I got pretty tired of pretty quick, Al, because it was a lot of work and we're out on the road a lot. But great experience, and we did some really great things and met some great people. And
yep. Now, was this through high school that you were working with your old man?
Yeah, I even started at primary school actually.
Right, yeah, right.
Yeah, but I got going. Dad always paid me reasonably well, so it sort of encouraged me. I think it was all about how hard you worked, is how hard you'd be rewarded. And I learnt very quickly that I could save some money, and we were always encouraged to try and save for our first car and first home, and we did all of that, which really does help, I guess, when you're a bit older. You appreciate that effort that you went to when you were young. All my mates would be out surfing and having a ball in their school holidays, and I was there stuck working with the old man. But it was, even my mates nowadays, they sort of say, you're always out working and never had any fun, but we certainly did. You just appreciate the fun times more, I think.
Sets up good habits later in life, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. And instilling that in your kids, I think it's a really hard thing to do. We sort of have those challenges. Our kids are probably getting to that age now where, you sort of think it's time to start working on that work ethic. Yep. And it's a process.
What age are your kids now?
10, 14, and Charlotte will be 16 at the end of this month, so we're in the thick of it.
Yep, well, they're at the top end of being able to be teachable, aren't they?
Oh, mate, I tell you what, it's a different generation, as we all know, but no, they're great. And I think each individual kid, anyone with a few kids knows that they're all very different and they all respond differently to different methods, if we want to call them methods. But I guess you got to roll with it a bit, and times are very different with the technology that's involved in the kids' lives, but keeping them out and active and, sporty, I think all of that helps.
Yeah, now just quickly, is there you earmarked one that's going to take over Snow Rural? Is there one that shows more interest in the farm, or have they got other pursuits at this stage?
Not really, mate. Charlotte's going to do ag next year at school, which is great. It's pretty exciting that they're offering that at so many schools now. And she loves animals, but she sees how much work kind of goes into the farm, and whether she wants a little bit more of a passive type of job herself. Being 16, I don't know if you knew what you wanted to do. I knew I did, but yeah, I don't think she's sort of quite there yet, but the farm will always be an option for any of the kids. I'd like to try and keep a bit of tech in the farm and stay current and give the kids something exciting, to sort of look forward to if that's what they want to do. And it really excites me, the whole concept of bringing the kids in and that fresh knowledge and that fresh, excitement that we had, I guess, when we first started, and to have your kids sort of prop you up and support you and learn stuff that you don't know about. For me, that would be the ultimate, and for the kids to be excited about it.
Yeah, well, you just mentioned technology on the farm there, and I've got a nearly 13-year-old, and the ability for him to navigate through computer screens and car screens with all their tech, they're so intuitive at that age, whereas sometimes I'm hampered by wanting a manual or something to read, but they just start pressing buttons and they get there surprisingly very quickly. So good asset. It
is, mate. And I think the efficiency there too, we'd both be very similar, I'm sure, is we can fumble our way through and figure it out, but like you say, the kids have just got that ability just to go to it and say, no, Dad, here, this is how you do it.
Now, what about Sarah, your wife? She actually works for Gippsland Ag on a part-time basis, or she's actually going to be listening to this podcast later today, probably putting it out to the socials. But what's her involvement in the farm? Has she got much of involvement or an ag background?
No ag background at all, and she really hasn't had a whole lot of, I wouldn't say interest, but not a whole lot to do with the farm business to date, except for does our bookkeeping. She went away from that for a little bit with a full-time job, but then has come back into it as our bookkeeper, and I absolutely love seeing her involved here at GAG. It's been a real, I don't know, it's been a bit of a shift for me in our relationship at home, as far as I can kind of talk to her a little bit more about the farming, using that farming language, I suppose. It is something that I know I had to learn because, not coming from a farming background, it is a whole new language as far as I was concerned. And I think Sarah's starting to appreciate a little bit more of that too. And GAG has really been able to throw her right into the thick of that, and just being surrounded by the great people that are here, and she loves it. And it's just nice having her involved that, it's not in our business as such, and I can still do what I like to do without us having to potentially butt heads about things, but just having a bit of an ag influence there is quite nice. And just seeing what goes on behind the scenes, with GAG, even that side of it has been great.
Yeah, she's been fantastic having her here, and I think actually it's been a real fresh personality come in that isn't immersed in ag, and so she will ask questions that makes us think, what are we talking about, or what are we actually focusing on? So it's a really good perspective, and it's good to hear that's rubbing off on her at home too. So she'll be out in the cow yards before long, just wait and see.
Well, hopefully, mate. She's been in a couple of times, and she's actually quite good with the cattle, nice and calm, and it's just, she's got plenty on her plate, so I don't often ask for assistance out there, but when we need it, she's usually quite happy to step up and give us a chop out.
Now, we actually moved forward a bit quicker than I like, so we're going to wind back a little bit. So straight out of school, you got a Bachelor of Science in Horticulture, and that was an obvious move that you wanted to make because you wanted to stay or progress in the family business.
Yeah, I wanted to do ag when I was at school. All my really good mates at school in Geelong, they were from proper farming families, and I always loved going to their farms, and it was just something that was in me. That was from my grandfather on mum's side. He was a farmer, and her mum, and ag was something that I really wanted to do. And my old man sort of probably talked me out of farming at a young age, just saying how difficult it is to make a go of it, which he was 100% right. I can say that. But I think it's that whole thing about, when there is something there that's so strong. Horticulture was a close second. We were in the turf game, and if you wanted to put the two courses side by side, I think you could transition very easily from one to the other. There's a lot of ag in hort and a lot of hort in ag. So just to go through that course and learn the science about soils and plants, it's all been very positive, I suppose, for ag, but it was all about that, that focus on turf. As I grew up, I realised I knew so much about the turf game without realising that it would be silly not to have a go as a career.
So in the back of your mind, was agriculture something that you wanted to transition in the long term? or were you sort of just like the romance of it but never thought it would be a possibility?
Yeah, it was definitely a romantic thing that I had with ag. You know, like I was saying, you go to your mates' farms and you think, gee, wouldn't this be magnificent to have my own place like this one day? And Dad bought a little farm in Bacchus Marsh. He's had a couple of farms in Bacchus Marsh and just small acreage, but on the river in Werribee River, great little irrigation block, and we're going to grow some turf. So I was going to build a house there with Sarah, and that was going to be our farm. You know, it's 52 acres. And for me at the time, it was just, that was going to be the ultimate. But then, there was a drought thrown in, a very bad drought. And then, that all changed. We were 3% of our water allocation for that farm. So 3 years down the track, we planned on putting turf in and growing turf ourselves. But it all got put on hold, and we ended up selling that farm and landed here eventually. Yeah,
so before we got up here, though, straight out of uni, did you take on the family business or did you start your own one up?
I'd sort of worked for Dad, for all of those years. And then while I was at uni, I started up my own little business. I got an ABN and away I went, and I did a couple of little contract jobs while I was at uni that were close by. I went to Burnley Uni there, and then after that I knew that I wanted to get into the turf construction game, and it was pretty much straight out of uni that we did the construction of the Docklands turf profile, and that pretty much kind of got me going with that high profile stuff. We got the contract for Geelong City Council, it was Cardinia Park, and took that on. So we're pretty lucky sort of just to be involved in that higher level of sports stadium management. And
so that became your sort of business, sports turf?
Yeah, and I darted off on that angle because Dad and I, we worked well together, but I always knew I wanted to do my own thing, and I had different ideas to what he had, and he was quite content just to do the sort of, I don't know, I call it the rougher work. I don't know what you want to call it, but the old man was always the first bloke to pick up a shovel, and a young bloke had sort of watch him do it, but he'd be happy to do that. And same in his business, he was always happy just to do those jobs, and, that other people probably didn't want to do. And I was more focused on, I guess, having that introduction to higher profile turf situations. I was really keen to tap into that. And
so what's your favourite ground then that you've worked on?
You can't go past, the MCG was the grandest, if you've ever been out in the middle of the G, you'd know what I mean. And
I had last year for an umpiring thing, and it was unbelievable actually. So,
and the atmosphere is, and you compare it to a place like Marvel, and it's just completely different. Marvel had a pretty bad stigma about it when we were there. Like we had people throwing things at us out in the ground because it was chopping up. Remember the early days? It was a bit of a...
You were actually laying that turf that they were grumpy about.
Yeah, we were the ones out there, and we laid the turf. And I don't know if you remember Death Valley, but there was a situation where there was no turf available, so they just plucked some bluegrass, from the farm up at Seymour, and they laid it down on the wing, and they were slip sliding all over the place, like an ice skating rink. And it was quite embarrassing, but nothing to do with us as staff on the ground. But did we cop it from the crowd?
How does that sit with you psychologically or mentally?
I don't know. It was, I guess you can somewhat appreciate what some of these sports people go through. You're out there and you're just doing your job, and people want to throw things at you or whatever, but you get on with it. And it was interesting. As far as the media goes, we read a lot of things in the Herald Sun in particular, and I don't mind naming the Herald Sun because it was just blatant lies, and it was a real eye-opener for a young person to sort of read these articles, and you sort of think, okay, well, you imagine what they're talking about outside of that. It's just, they can make up whatever they want, really. So,
how old were you at the time?
So, 21.
Right. So,
I was 21, yeah.
Yeah, you're a baby basically in the game.
Yep. But it was, it was great, mate. It was a big responsibility, and we worked with some really great people. Les Burdett would come over. We had the first cricket game at Docklands when we had the contract there. And he got us tickets to the ACB party, and we're chit-chatting with Alan Border and Ian Healy, and all the guys were there, the War Brothers, and it was surreal. You're sort of amongst your childhood heroes, and all because of your job,
Right, so you're getting through the back door to these sporting events still, or do you have to go to the front?
I probably could. I've got a couple of mates who are still high profile, and you don't often call on them unless it's a really big one that you're keen to get a bit closer or whatever, if it's a concert. But we probably don't go to as many of those things anymore.
You obviously got burnt out, or the pressures of people throwing Coke cans at you at Etihad, or whatever they called Marvel back then.
Who knows what it's called yet?
Yeah, you started looking for work elsewhere, or is it something more to it? Did you just want to get out of the city or change careers path? How did you end up at Lilydale Turf?
It was just a natural transition. I could never work in the same place for, I don't know, any more than 2 or 3 years, as a young person. There's an increasing scale, and as I'm learning, I'm feeling great. And then as it starts to plateau, but I tend to lose interest when I'm not on that steep learning curve, and it's been something for me in my whole life so far. Now, it doesn't matter what I'm doing, whether it's sport or music or my job, my career. And I saw that a lot when I look back, the chopping and changing, and it's all led to ag, really, because I loved what I was doing, and if I could stay in the same place for a prolonged period of time and just call it home, then that would be the ideal situation. And all that we were doing in the turf game was that, except we're all over the place. And the farm made sense.
So you applied for the job at Lilydale Turf, or how'd you end up at the Lilydale Turf farm?
Yeah, it was an interesting one how that happened, because we ended up in that very long drought, in Geelong especially. Melbourne was pretty bad too. There's water restrictions and everything. So our turf business started to sort of slow down because they weren't building sports fields, which was our primary sort of game. So we sort of darted off. We looked at opportunities, I suppose, to try and encourage people to continue to do that. So we bought some water trucks and we started using Class A recycled water, and we'd offer that service to water the grounds after we built them. And councils were going for it. And it started happening quite a lot. Councils were buying lots of recycled water and getting people to truck water in. So this is how dry it was, We weren't allowed to water, turn the taps on and water. So you had to get a little bit creative. And then, the drought just went on and on. So it got harder, and I got a little bit tired of, I had sort of up to 8 staff of my own. And as I started to break my crews up, I found that I was losing control. When I was with my crew, we were all great mates and we got along, we travelled together. And when I broke up my crews and put some guys in charge of each, it was my management, nothing else. The fish rots from the head always. So, but as a young bloke, you don't really understand that, I guess. And it just got a little bit to the point where we weren't doing the work that I liked to do, which was really good work. I like to, really sort of leave a job and say we're proud of that.
Yeah. And
so the job for Lilydale, we used to do a lot of contract work for them out on these sports fields. And Steve Cole, he was an old friend and a person who gave us a really good go over the years as a young business. He got us onto some really high-profile jobs. And he said, would you like to come down and set up a farm for us in East Gippsland? And I was spinning the wheels a bit at home, and we wanted to get down here desperately because Sarah's family are from here originally, and we'd come and visit quite a lot and love the place. And before we knew it, mate, I was coming up here a few months before I started the job, and setting up a brand new turf farm, which is probably one of the biggest turf farms in Australia here right now in East Gippsland. Awesome experience, learnt so much.
So you're part of the formation of the turf farm up here, were you?
Yeah, I was here on my own for probably 12 months, and then I got some help. We started off with a small 20-hectare pivot of turf, and it was a blank canvas. And Gary, the owner, he was amazing in that he really offered me a sense of ownership when it came to setting up this farm. He pretty much said, you put the shed where you want, the colour you want. It was down to all of that sort of stuff. So it really felt like my farm, which was pretty exciting. For
someone else writing the checks too is even better.
Mate, it was amazing. And for the guy, he's had a really red hot go, and you should see the place. If you haven't seen it, it is unbelievable what they've done there.
Yep. So how much grass is growing out there now, do you know? I
couldn't tell you exactly, but there's 2 big laterals. There's probably 4 pivots now. So they've got a lot of turf going out of the place. Like, you'll see the trucks up and down the highway, and they've always had a go, and they still are. And it's an impressive operation, that's for sure. That's
good to hear. So how many years were you with the Lilydale Turf Farm up here in East Gippsland?
It was about 5.5.
So you lasted more than your 3.
Yeah, well, I was getting better and better. So I think if I could get some skin in the game on that turf farm, I would have probably still been there. But it was one of those things, I always had that ambition to have my own, call something my own. And then we bought our first property here, and, our first 100 acres, and that just set it off. We
Now, is that the original place you're on now?
It is, yeah.
So it's almost across the road from the turf farm, is it?
It's right on it, and we subdivided it off the turf farm.
Yeah.
At the time, the timing was great. It just meant, I said to Gaz, I just need somewhere to call home. They'd let us do most of what we wanted to do, but you know what it's like. You just want somewhere to call home. And as soon as we bought that 100 acres, it really made me feel settled. And it's funny, like I look back now and I've been farming for longer than I've ever done anything. And it's been 13 years, I think. And 5.5 of that was at the turf farm and the rest has been on our own. But we were able to progress to a small block next door of 160 acres, and then we bought another 850 over at Steadmore just before I quit at the turf farm.
Yeah, so that was the beginning of your transition into, beef and fodder production, is that correct? Yeah,
so we had a few cattle. We bought our first 25 heifers from the Pendergasts up at the high country, and beautiful little Herefords they were, and there's not a single Hereford left on the place.
There's no red ones left anymore at your place?
No, there's not, mate. The Baldies still pop up occasionally, but, like most people can appreciate, the market has kind of pushed us in that direction. I wouldn't say the black cattle are any easier to handle.
Yeah.
They're certainly not, but we do breed a lot for temperament now, and, it's a lot to do with the handling, and we put a lot into that as well these days.
So let's talk about your business. It's called Snow Rural. So you started, you said 13 years ago, your first per block that you bought. Tell us about the operation right now. What does Snow Rural look like? So
we're predominantly beef cattle, black Angus beef cattle, and we've just shifted recently from 100% breeding, or call it 95% breeding, to more of it's a fairly loose kind of approach, I think. I'm not going to say a 50-50 approach, but that's the general idea I've got in my head at the moment. Is we call it a 50-50 breeder trading enterprise, where we can take the pressure off when we need to without feeling the pinch of reducing your breeders too much. Where we are is very volatile when it comes to shutting down. Like, the place can shut down on you in 2 weeks, and if you can't move quick, then you get caught behind or left behind with animals that continue to go backwards, and eventually, you're just second guessing yourself every 5 minutes, because you've got to be really quick, make a decision quick, and that's why the trade cattle, we can just move them on first and then manage that core breeding herd as a priority when things get tight.
Yeah, what's your soil like down that way? Does that influence how quickly you can turn off?
Yeah, definitely. It's very light. When I say very light, we're a sandy loam, but a light sandy loam, and into very light sand up on some of that back country that we've got to the south. And we've just recently discovered that through deep soil tests that our sandy country is probably a better option for us for our deeper rooted type irrigated pastures or crops that we want to grow for sale. But the heavier soil types that we thought were the better soil types, they have actually got quite a nasty subsoil.
How deep is it, that layer?
It varies a bit, but we can be anywhere from 15 centimetres of topsoil down to, say, 30 centimetres of topsoil into that heavy clay, that sodic clay. There's aluminium down there as well, so we thought growing maize on those paddocks would be amazing, but as far as we're concerned, it's probably not going to be a fantastic option for us, those areas. So more shallow-rooted perennials maybe, but just work with your soil is probably, the best we can do really in this situation and the climate. And from what you asked, how quickly it can shut off in 2 weeks. If it gets dry and then you get a couple of hot days thrown in, the whole place can just switch off like that.
You get hammered by the wind down there too, I'm assuming?
Yeah, it's been hideous, hasn't it? Spring is one of those seasons here that I've always said never ever cultivate in spring, and we cultivated this spring setting up a new pivot, and we cultivated, and we had a little bit of blow, but we've also incorporated a lot of chook manure into the ground, which makes a huge difference, and we don't turn it into talcum powder anymore. It's a more realistic approach. So you learn something every season, but we know for most springs that the wind will turn up at some point, and did it turn up this spring?
Yeah, it's probably the most prolonged windy days I can remember in all my time here. So
yeah.
Now, you also mentioned pivots there a couple of times. Did that place come with pivots, or is that something that you're put in to try and mitigate those variable seasons that we get?
We bought the place with a bit of water, and it had a little 2-span pivoting lateral. So it was there they grew seed spuds on the place before we turned up, so they'd pick that up and shift it to different areas and use it that way. But it was very inefficient and not really enough of an area to sort of warrant turning the tap on. So we extended that and put in a decent pivot, and we've got a plan for another 2 pivot points right now that we're working through. Every year we seem to have a bit of a drama with our bore, and it's just that character building stuff that you seem to cop each year, and we've just had another one after just putting the thing back down in at the end of Feb. So need to put in the budget, I think, Al, for a big damage bill on the irrigation side of things every year. But hopefully we've ironed out a few creases and we can get on with have a few years of good irrigating without too many hassles.
Yeah. So what are you normally growing under those irrigation pivots?
So we grow a bit of maize, also just through the winter, pretty basic, cereal crops, maybe with a bit of clover as fodder, and you can use it as a bit of a bonus to take a bit of silage to store, for the following winter. We've got a reasonable amount of stored fodder for the next drought event for dry times.
How are you storing that? Bunkers?
Yeah, so we had 3 and we went through 2 of those, I think it was last winter, trying to feed cows, which is another reason why we've stepped away from so many breeders. But once you open those pits, anyone that's got them, you're very committed, and it's pretty much you got to be there each day or every second day feeding animals. So we're a little bit reluctant to sort of go back into that. Like, we wanted to try it, and I'm not writing it off, but having a bit of a variety, I think, of storage methods on your stored fodder seems to work quite well for us.
Yep. Now you have one staffer in Ant.
Yep. Got it.
Another Ant, isn't he?
Another Ant, yeah. Ant and Anth. And Ant Nicklin is my main man out there. And he's just a great local young fella who very passionate about farming. And anyone that's heard me talk about Ant knows how much I appreciate him and what he does for our business. The guy's got the best work ethic out of any young person I've come across today. So everyone needs to stay away from taking him off me, though, because he's a very valuable person. And I think, we try to give Ant a bit of a sense of ownership in what he does too. I
was going to ask you about that learnings you had from obviously multiple staff down in Geelong area, and then coming up here and feeling like you were working for wages and wanting that ownership. How has that sort of formed your working relationship with someone like Ant, and what are you trying to do to keep him involved in the business and around for the long time?
Yeah, I'm definitely still learning, Al, because I think the old school mentality was, you treat staff like staff. But this day and age, especially when we're dealing with younger people, they like to be stimulated and they like to have variety in what they do. And I'm probably a little bit lucky. Ant's quite a settled bloke. Like, he's quite focused on farming, and we get along really well. And I like to just, I suppose there's got to be a ladder to climb for anyone. This is just probably a personal sort of perspective, but if someone's got a ladder to climb and they can be rewarded along the way and not pushed too hard into an area that they're not comfortable with without the support. So we like to try and I've always put it out there to Ant, if he wants to develop, we'll develop him, and I'd love Ant to become a farm manager for us at some point, but I want him to be comfortable doing that, and I need to be comfortable, obviously, developing that person. So you got to, I guess, be a little bit realistic too as to what people can and can't do in a period of time. You expect a lot of people these days because it is a fast-paced world, and the farm as we know it, you make one decent mistake and it can cost you a lot of money. It's hard to make that back. So we try and, it's not perfectionism, but I've kind of gone away from all of that where I try to get everything perfect and accept some good with the bad, but we're probably winding it back to trying to do things better. Like they talk about, the 101 percenters. I love that whole concept. That really sits nicely with me, is do 101% as well. And that's where you kind of get along in farming, I see. And I'm no expert, but I really feel for our business that's what has changed things for us.
Yeah, well, it's a nice little segue because you were possibly not being silly on a motorbike, but you broke your foot. What was it, last year, was it?
The year before.
Yeah.
Were
you being silly?
Maybe a little bit. I was just out with Sam on the farm. We're just moving a few cattle quietly on a Sunday, and I might have, just tried to go around a corner a little bit quick maybe, and I ended up on the ground, and properly broken foot.
Yeah, so you were in a moon boot for quite a while, which slowed you down physically. Had you to spend some more time in the office. How has that been for your business, and how you think about the operation now? Has it changed?
It's changed immensely. The office was something that I knew I had to do. I didn't love sitting in front of a computer, although I knew that the business side of it was very important. But I always like to get out and get my hands dirty and get amongst it and sit on the seed drill. Or
Yeah, well, I can confirm that sitting across me there's some smashed up fingers, I saw. So you've obviously been doing something that's bashed your fingers up this morning already. So
yeah, every now and then, mate, you sort of, you get things where they shouldn't be and fingers where they shouldn't be. But yeah, it's like I say, it's a real balance. But having been forced into the office when I broke my foot, like I couldn't even put a pigtail in the ground. That's how bad things are when you've got one foot, and you kind of really appreciate your mobility when you've got it, when you get it back. So forced into the office, and I thought this is a great chance to really dig into my business and tidy a few things up. So I did what most people would start with, and that's, finding your best insurance deal and finding your best, electricity rates and all that sort of stuff. And then I dug deeper into that whole idea of how do I run my business better, and how do I give my staff a better opportunity? How do we grow this business? We're in a bit of no man's land with our scale. So I needed to develop a way of bringing our business up to that next level so that we were maximising, the equipment that we've got and the assets and making those work as best as they could. And I've done a fair few courses in that time.
what are some of the more beneficial ones that you've been part of?
The courses, you mean?
Yeah.
So it was a bit more back in the day, was the Farm Owners Academy. There's I can't remember the exact name of the course, Freedom Farmer or something along those lines, but it was just more about getting some systems into your business. Having regular meetings with your staff is one example. Getting on top of your books obviously is another huge one, with budgeting and the whole budgeting side of it. I became a bit of a budget. I was just addicted to this budget. I was in it nearly every second day thinking, how can I dial this in better so that bottom line looks the way I want it to look, at the end of that financial year. And just getting into that and really understanding your numbers and where your sales opportunities are. That is everything in a business. And I'm in the office so much more now than I've ever been, and I don't feel guilty about it either, because you really feel as though you're being proactive, and things don't get on top of you when you just sneak in there every day for a little bit. I usually have my lunch sitting in front of the computer and just check emails and nut out a few of those business sort of things that are really sitting there on my mind, and try and be ahead of it.
Yeah. So someone that doesn't like sitting in front of the screen at all, what advice would you give them, or what sort of key things do they need to be on top of running their business? Yeah,
for me, I think budget is everything. Now, in this day and age, with inputs being as expensive as they are, and we're seeing some pretty good prices right now. And if prices could stay where they are, then I guess there's a bit of reprieve there. But when things get tight again and those prices drop, which of course they will, that's when, as you would know, you can't make money winging it anymore. Being on top of your numbers is what's really changed our business. And we're involved with a couple of great groups. Like, we're in a benchmarking group, and we all get into each other's figures, and you got to have a bit of a thick skin and be prepared to drop your DAX and show everyone exactly what it is that you're good at and what you're not good at, and be ready for some pretty sort of harsh advice at times, I guess. But if you're ready for that, the benefits are amazing. And it's probably one of the best things you can do is if you can find like-minded farmers who you can share information with and bounce off each other. And certainly don't be afraid to ask people who are doing it well how you can improve, and asking those questions of each other, I think, it's just there's such a huge opportunity for everyone to better their business.
When you did start looking at the budget in more detail and being in the office more, what was something that did stand out about your operation that you're like, that needs to improve, or we're making good ground here?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I realised was we were selling cattle for cash all the time to be able to stay afloat. So our opportunities were all being lost. I won't say all being lost, but a lot of that opportunity was being lost because we're forced to sell cattle because we needed the dollars to pay the bills. So when we got to that point where we're still trying to get the banks on board, we've been shuffling a lot of that side of it for our business to make sure that we've got the support we need to carry cattle through, to sell them when we want to sell them, and when there's the best opportunity for our business. And it's that, it is that 1%er that makes the difference from selling weaners that are worth bugger all. It was costing us more to sell a weaner than it was to produce the thing,
So having done that budget and that cash flow or forecasting, you can go to your bank manager and say, look, we need to extend our terms for a bit longer, or something as simple as that, so that we can sell when we want it. Is that part of the planning you did? Yeah,
we have probably struggled a little bit more and more with banks being a smaller business, and we've just dragged in a finance broker, and he's been able to seek out the best bank opportunity for us. So we're just in the process of switching banks now, but it's a long and drawn out process. But the old school bank manager just doesn't exist anymore, especially for smaller businesses. Anything sub $2 million these days, or 10 million in reality, banks don't really want to know you. So for us to be able to get a good team of people around us, an accountant, a finance broker, and a bank that will support to a certain degree, but we don't really lean on the banks. I'll change banks tomorrow if we find a better deal, but you just got to be organised and prepared to do that, I suppose, because it's almost like you're sitting in this digital world with banks. There's just no one to talk to anymore. So for us, as we're trying to grow this business, we need that support, and without it, we've had a couple of experiences where things just get too close to the line to be continuing business that way. So that's why we've moved across to this new relationship with a finance broker.
Now, you just mentioned there, grow the business. Tell us some of your numbers, how many hectares you run, how many cows, how many trade you do, and then what's the next 5 years look like for you?
So we're around that 300 breeders, give or take 50, I reckon, is where we're probably at. We're around 300 at the moment, and I think we're probably looking to trade in up to 500 little cattle once we get this new irrigation ground all prepared. I think we've got a huge capacity there to increase the trade stock, and that might even be dragging in a few cows and calves if that's the right deal. You can do that, but being able to put the pressure on and take it off, that's the key. So we're about 520 hectares. We've been looking for another place to buy, but at the moment with interest rates, we're struggling to make it work. So even to lease, there's just not really much around in the way of properties with decent fences that you can really lease well and run livestock. So for us,
do you want to split your risk by going somewhere further afield, or you want local?
I'd love to. I've looked up the high country quite a lot, but the scale...
There's a property for sale up there, isn't there?
There's quite a few, I think, yeah. And we did look at one. It was 700 acres, but I think you need scale up there. And while our kids are the age they are and we're running around like lunatics, outside of the farm, I think when the kids have sort of left home and I'm still excited about farming, we could potentially look at something up there. But for now, we believe we want to supercharge what we've got. We've got a really nice little opportunity there. The farm, I could still make 60 or 70% more improvements on the place to really get it humming. So I think we get focused on that and spend the money on irrigation infrastructure and really, spend our money carefully, be smart about where we spend the money. So that's that whole, I guess, where our business is going is to get a really nice operation there that we can replicate and understand how to develop it to that point where it's efficient and it's making us some money. And we've got a lifestyle to go with it too, because I think we all, that badge of honour that they talk about, it wears real thin when you're not making any money. And I'm still yet to work out how we make it really efficient. But we've all got to work together and share our experiences and try and help each other not make the mistakes that we've all made too. Yeah,
well, part of that journey, you're very involved in the Gippsland Ag Group. You're actually on the board. Are you a recent board member? We've been on for a while now.
About 3 years.
3 years.
Now.
So that's a while. And have you changed roles though recently?
Oh, they chucked me into secretary, so
there you go. More time at the desk.
I don't know, if I'm much of a secretary, mate, but I've got Nicole, she gives me a proper chop out there. I'm well looked after in that respect. It's interesting though to be put into a role like that where you've really got to step up and understand what it is that you're signing. And it's been a really good shove, I think, for me to step into something that I'm not really all that comfortable in doing. But yeah, that's what we do, and it's great to be involved.
Yep. So you are involved. So you obviously see value in a group like Gippsland Ag. What changes have you noticed around the Gippsland farming community because of something like Gippsland Agriculture Group?
It's been massive, Al. I was only talking about this with someone yesterday, is how the landscape has changed from driving from our place into Bairnsdale, which drives past the Gippsland Ag Centre, and there's people actually having a go out here now. You know, with all the farms when I first turned up here were pretty run down, sheep farms. They told me I was mad putting cattle on our place. All the older farmers, they said, you know, you're crazy, which in some respects they're on the money, because it's tough to run cattle, but you've just got to do it. You've got to do it different to how they did it. And to see the landscape change, I think, and it's mostly to do with people seeing the trials run at a place like this, where they can come and they can see exactly how things grow in this environment.
In their backyard, pretty much.
Exactly. Yeah. And then you see people, even if they're only doing, 20 acres or whatever it might be, you're seeing these little patches pop up everywhere of people trying things, and they've got the confidence to do that because, you've got a place like Gippsland Ag who are really doing things that they're very complementary to anything that anyone wants to do here. And whether it's just getting into farming or at a higher level, there's all of that. Yeah, there's all of that opportunity to come and gain some information, gain some knowledge, and have a go yourself.
Yeah, we just said getting into farming then, and at a lot of our events we do see a younger generation of farmers coming along attending. What advice or opportunities for young people are out there, especially non-generational farmers? What are your thoughts on that? Because you've come through those ranks a little while ago now, but...
Yeah, I still remember being called a young farmer when I really started farming. And I was like 32, I think, around 32, 33. And I thought, I'm not really that young. But when you look back, you're still quite young. When you look at the average age of farmers, you'd know better than me what it is. It'd be 65 or something along those lines.
Yeah, I think it's a touch higher, actually. But
yeah. I guess the most difficult thing, obviously, for younger people is acquiring the land. We had a person, was obviously a young person. There was a handwritten letter in our mailbox and it said, "Hi, we're really keen to lease some land if you've got some land available." And I sort of had to smile, because at least they're thinking about, you got to put yourself out there, don't you? And I see that opportunity with some of the older generation getting out of farming that have told the kids there's nothing here for you. Some of these younger people, they might be able to tap into that and go out and support some of these older generation of farmers who still want to live on the farm, and they can still live on the farm and open some gates for you and all of that sort of thing. But the transition into potentially picking up a purchase at the end of that, there's plenty of structures that I see people could put together. Just get a little bit creative and have a think about other ways of getting into farming, because let's be realistic, buying a property is really hard. Even if you've got an established farm business, it's really hard at the moment to spend that sort of money and make a business work.
And then we recently bought a little block, and we sort of, we knew about it, but the realities of buying livestock, once you bought the property, it compounds everything, doesn't it? Especially prices now are good, which is good if you've got livestock, but if you get into it, it makes it another challenge as well. So
it does, mate. And people don't realise that either. That sort of extra cost in spreading a bit of fert, some herbicide, buying the livestock, like you said, fixing fences. It just goes on and on. It's not just buying the property; it's being able to obviously manage that property and keeping that business turning over in a positive way.
Yeah, then we start talking about cash flow, and that's another issue, especially if you buy cows. So no, it sounds very difficult, but one advice I think that most people would say is, if you're thinking about it, get into it now, because it's never going to get easier or cheaper. And anyone that's done it for a couple of years wish they had done it earlier or bought more property when they can. So you got to start somewhere, and even if it's just buying a couple of cows and leasing on your grandma's place or something like that, make sure you get a start, because you will progress. You've got to make a start though.
Yeah, and you think time goes quickly, and it really does. When you look back and you sort of think, gee, I thought I would have achieved a lot more over those years, and farming's a real slow game, I think, unless you're one of those people that is prepared to have a huge crack and invest. There's different risk appetites, obviously, and I'm probably sitting somewhere in the middle, and it's taken me a lot longer than I've expected that it would to get to this point, and we're still got a long way to go. So, like you said, get involved, do it now somehow, figure out a way of getting a foot in the door somewhere and go and work for someone that's struggling, give them a chop out and, develop a relationship. And before you know it, you might have yourself a nice little property that you can lease or potentially buy down the track.
Yeah, there's opportunities if you're involved. You can always say no at the end of the day too. So
Absolutely.
Now, we've talked a lot about farming, but you've actually got a very interesting story outside of farming too. I sent off an email to you with a list of questions, and about 5 times, and I'm not lying, the topic of music came up, which is something I never knew about you, Ant, and you said, don't have to talk about it, but I want to. Your music career. When did you start? And we nearly lost you to music, I reckon, at one stage.
I'll tell you, and it wasn't a career, Al, I don't think, but it was my first passion. Farming came second, but it definitely came second.
Now, let's talk about music. Are you a singer, guitar, piano? What do you do?
So I grew up playing the drums. I played the drums for 18 years, I think it was,
right,
and always tinkered with the guitar, and I found I liked to sing as well. When I got a bit older, I didn't like singing at school, and then as I got a bit older, started to enjoy playing some guitar and singing. I'd always written my own music right from a young age, sort of probably 13 or 14 years old. I like to just sit and...
What sort of genre are we talking?
So we're probably a heavier type of style, progressive. There's no real rules to the music that we wrote. It would sort of take you on a bit of a journey, I think. So it's not a verse, chorus type deal. It's just whatever came out and that we liked. We were never out there playing music to be popular. It was just about playing the music that we really enjoyed. And I was lucky enough to have some amazing mates that I've played music with over the years, that when you're in a band like that, the relationships, it is like a family. And that was just that whole other life for me that I needed outside of work.
Yep. So did the band have a name?
I've had a few bands, but like our best original band was called Varliba. Varliba means free verse.
Right.
So that was our best. It was an underground type arrangement with the clubs that we played, but a great scene. It was like a huge family of the biggest crowd you'd sort of play to. Most nights were a few hundred, but just nice people that you'd be involved with. The punters were amazing, and like I say, it was like an alternate life outside of work, and you could really escape the everyday with your music and get out and about and do something different.
So when was this? Was this uni days or after when you were running the turf?
So played in bands at school, and then uni, always played in bands. I had a little bit of a hiatus from music. When things got really busy, I always played. I would sit down and play my guitar, and when I had to move to the city, the drums kind of went by the wayside because you'd have too many neighbours complaining. But you could sit and quietly play your guitar and have a bit of a hum and enjoy that. And then, it would have been, I was about 29. We fired up our main band that did a few East Coast tours and over to Adelaide a bit, and that was pretty amazing, really, that side of it.
Did we actually nearly lose you to music? Because I heard a story that you're obviously reluctant to share, but you nearly toured with someone pretty famous.
Almost, and it's another one of those almost stories, but it was, I got asked to play guitar and be a backup singer for a guy who was touring with John Farnham. So it was very different to the music that we were playing, but his mum, the guy that I was going to play with, his mum used to come and watch our band play a lot, and he was an amazing muso, this guy, and I just couldn't get there in the 2 weeks that I had to learn all these songs, and so I was quite shattered. I loved John Farnham growing up. That would have been the ultimate, but it was just that one that got away, Al.
So you literally just couldn't learn the songs you didn't feel in the time?
I tried, and I ended up saying to him in the end, I said, mate, I just can't get on a stage that big and perform like you'd need me to, so I've got to let it go. So he ended up getting a session muso to fill that role, but I was pretty shattered, actually. It would have been an amazing experience to do it at that level. So that's, like I said, it was never a career for us, but what it sort of meant, I guess, for me outside of work and everyday life, it was huge.
Yep. Do you pick up the guitar or the mic in front of crowds anymore?
No, not in front of crowds. I'd sort of we've talked about, we've got a lot of mates who are reforming their bands and they get out and play some gigs, and we're just too far away from each other now. My bass player, he's up in Cairns, he lives up there. Our drummer, he's down in Torquay, and just getting together, it's quite difficult. You've got to rehearse a lot. And
any local artists that are looking to form a band? I reckon Snowy's got a couple of big sheds out there.
Yeah, that's right, mate.
Yeah,
but my young bloke,
up.
James, he's right into it. He's the guitar player. He's 100 times better than I ever was. So it'd be interesting to sort of sit with him and watch his progression. And I'll give him a red hot go at if he wants to have a go and support him.
Oh, will lead us on to our last question, because if I was to learn something that interests me, that would be mine. Now, I'm not actually sure if I put this on the email, Snowy, but what's something that you have learnt recently that surprised you?
I did have a think about it, Al, because I know you asked that question. I think the biggest thing, and relate to farming, is the whole idea of being able to make a decision really quickly is so important, especially where we are, the way it switches off, and, the potential to miss those opportunities because you procrastinate is probably something I've learnt recently, and I know now I've just got to make a decision, whether it's the right decision or it's not. Just make the decision and get on with it and own it, and then next time do it better if it doesn't work out, or if it works out then fantastic. But make the decision and move on, because it can certainly do your head in if you deliberate over things too much.
Yeah, there's a bit of a common theme coming up through some of these podcasts about that decision-making ability. And the very first podcast we ever did, Mark Coleman said, no decision is the worst decision. So even if you make a decision, it's a bad decision.
Yep.
It's still a better decision than making no decision. So
you're
onto something. You're onto something. So, well, we really appreciate you coming in. I've really enjoyed this chat, and I reckon we'll get you back in a couple of months' time, because there's more to discuss, I think. Yeah,
sorry, I do waffle on a bit, Al. I'm a bit of an oversharer sometimes, but it's just good just to have a chat and catch up, and, it's pleasure to be here and appreciate it.
No, I really appreciate you. Well, you didn't put up your hand. I forced it up, but appreciate you coming in, so thank you.
Good on you, Al. Thanks, mate.
A big thank you for tuning in today. And remember, if you have a question about today's episode or a topic you'd like us to cover, reach out to one of our many platforms and join the conversation. We're here because of your passion and commitment to agriculture. Together, we can build a stronger farming future.
This podcast is made possible by the Future Drought Fund Regional Drought Resilience Planning Program, co-funded by the Victorian and Australian governments.